Right, I'm here for another one of my donated discussions. So anyone who's at the 100 or above tier can participate. I've said this in the past, but I will reiterate it in case people haven't heard before. If you are an old donator that was at that level and you either never took part in one of these, or maybe you did like one, just send me a DM, basically. Tell me what your username is. I can confirm all that, and then I'll put you in some of the future ones. Like, it's always good to have cool people to have conversations with, and if people want all the perks, I want them to make sure they got them. So 2 people I've got with me now is Matt, who people might have heard on a more recent one, and then we've also got Frisky, who did one a couple ago when we did them. They're both into League of Legends, so we have some overlap there. A bit more specificity for the European side for Matt, and then Frisky is watching like the Asian region, so LPL, LCK. I thought what we could do on this one is you guys have your own thoughts about all the roster moves. It's been pretty crazy roster mania in all these regions. Thought let's just go through the teams we're interested in. We don't have to do all of them. We'll just do the ones we're interested in. We'll all give our takes. Everyone watched Worlds. Everyone's got at least a baseline minimum. So, okay, Matt, how about we start with maybe we can go team for team if you want. Like, you pick an LEC team that you're interested in, then let's talk about it. We'll swap over.
Yeah, well, the most interesting for me first is Heretics with Wonder and Perks. So
if people don't know, this is where they've basically got G2 2018 top side. So it's Perks mid, Yankos jungle, Wonder top lane, and then the bot lane is actually Flackhead and Kaiser, and then it's coached by Peter Dunn. So what are your initial thoughts on this one? Like, are you hyped by this roster? I mean, I know some people, I feel like some people either are hyped or they maybe think that like these are washed players and like maybe Perks is like trying it too many times. So where you at on this one? Were you hyped?
Yeah, I'm kind of hyped. I've always liked 2018, 2019 G2 was like probably my favorite time ever in League of Sports. So Perks has always been phenomenal to watch, and I think Wonder has been like super interesting. And I really like the Wonder Bwipo like rivalry they had during that time. So I think just those players themselves, I think, are always good. So I think they should like definitely get one. Or
how good do you think it'll be though? Like can it win the LEC in your mind?
I think it depends. Like, the other rosters, I guess, are kind of strong, but I wouldn't say they couldn't. I mean, yeah, not confident, but yeah, they could.
Okay. Right. The good thing here, Frisky, is even if you don't watch LEC too much, mate, you know all these players. They've all been to Worlds, won LEC. So what do you think of this roster? What are your thoughts?
When I first saw it, I was pretty hyped too. Some of my favorite players as well. I've been watching Yankos for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years at this point, and I've always enjoyed him. To see him with Wonder and Perks again, especially when he was kind of in Elo hell for a lot of last year, is really exciting. I'm also have been a big fan of Kaiser for the last kind of 3 years since since 2020 when Mad Lions started doing really well. I always thought he was kind of a very smart support. I feel like he had to deal with Karzi, who's not an easy ADC to deal with. To me, I feel like he's got a lot of similarities to Vander. He's probably been the best support in the LEC for those last couple of years, aside from Mikey X. I think this team has a pretty high ceiling that they can reach, but since it's a bunch of older players, I'm not sure if they will like fall down and like maybe, I don't know if they don't reach Worlds or like, I don't think they'll fall as far as Vitality. Let's say that, where the expectations were so high and they came up so short, but I don't, I think there's some questions as to if they'll attain their greatness.
Like the key thing for, go on. Yeah, go on, Matt.
I think the narrative behind Kaiser, like for me, I don't know, like where I hear like he's been like absolute crap or shit the past like season and a half. So I don't know where you get like he's super good, but like I know Kaiser was good on his debut in like Mad Lions, but like I think he's probably the weak point where I'd say if shit goes wrong, I think Kaiser's probably to blame.
Well, that's actually the interesting thing for this move for me is I wouldn't personally pick him as the player because, like you say, if you saw the last year or so, it was a bit underwhelming. I even thought before that he had his issues. But if there's anyone could bring him back to form, it is the original coach he had in that Mad Lions, which is Peter Dunn. So if anything, I actually can see why Peter's done this. He's sort of attempted to sort of buy low on Kaiser and then think he can bring out all the upside. Like, people do tell me behind the scenes, like last year, even though he played terribly, suppose he did grind and he did put in the hours, it just for whatever reason just didn't work. So I'm not really, I can't say I would vouch for the move myself, but I do vouch for Peter Dunn. And I actually think that's the two biggest angles for me are the coach and the top side. Like, there's a world where I can totally see why people look at the top side and think like, they're all washed, they're all like, do they care anymore? But that's why I brought up that point that like Perks has signed, not for the minimum, but a very low salary and an enormously low salary compared to what he used to get on Vitality and Cloud9, because that does suggest to me he didn't just join for the most money, as far as all the teams could have paid more. And if you think of all three of them, Jankos just wasted a whole year on Heretics where he could never have gone to Worlds. Wonder was on Fnatic and then just bailed because it was shit and helped him out at the end. And then Perks just had a complete nightmare on what in theory was a super team. It didn't work out. So I actually think all three of them, they're not lying. I think they really are really hungry to try and prove themselves and to prove that they can still be a champion and go to Worlds. And then the most interesting detail is the coaching angle, because I do think Peter Dunn's an amazing coach, but as people will know, I do think there are different types of coaches. And so I think there are coaches that are amazing with rookies and with more flawed players and can sort of find a way to make that player really amazing and comfortable. The problem is there's a different type of coach usually in sports that works with the massive superstars and sort of knows when to get out of their way and when to let them sort of break the rules. So it's just that we've never seen that type of team from Peter Dunn. So that's the only angle I'm sort of a bit out on, is I just don't know yet whether he will prove to be that sort of a coach. Like when people have heard me big up people like Youngbuck before, it's not for some amazing draft or some player he found. It's because behind the scenes I know that, like, you'll find out soon in a video, there was a tournament, guys, where Fnatic literally was going to kick people and they would never play together. He fixed things like personality wise, and they made like an insane run. So you might be able to guess which year I'm talking about here, but you'll find out in a future video. So I think to me, that's a different skill set than the guy who works with the rookies, the guy who does the draft, etc. So I'm very interested to see, actually, can all of this work at the same time? Like, I do think on paper it's potentially the most hyped team, but there probably is also a world where it just doesn't work. Who knows?
Yeah. Do you think that the team can kind of coach itself, like Faker?
That's an interesting detail. Yeah.
Would be a coach.
Like, I will say, I do think, put it this way, like, you know how no one ever really did bring up the guy who was the coach in Vitality, the Carter guy from Misfits. They only ever really brought it up when they were referencing that, like, oh, but he used to be in Misfits with Neon, if you remember at the beginning of the first split last year. They're like, but he was Neon's old coach. That's the only time they ever referenced him. When everyone flamed the team, they would never even mention the coach. So I almost do feel like in that team, I suspect the idea was like Perks thought he could sort of be a coach, but the things I've heard from behind the scenes, that team was just a nightmare. It sounds like it was a bad mix in general. So I do think those players are capable of, like, that top side of the map doesn't really need much coach, in my opinion. I do think you're going to need to coach the fuck out of like Kaiser in the bot lane and make it all work. So it's definitely an interesting angle. I see what you mean on that one. Like, I would give like Perks, he should be allowed like that Faker status, like you say, where he can sort of call his own shots.
Yeah, that's nice.
Right. Okay. What about Frisky? Pick a team, mate. Doesn't have to be LEC. It can be LCK if you want. It's up to you. You pick one.
Yeah.
Okay, I can pick I'll pick an LCK one. Let's take a look. Actually, I'll kind of talk about, if you want, I can talk about a not roster move, because I think it's really interesting that all 5 of this T1 team is staying together. Well, first of all, just from a team movement standpoint over the years, though, this team's been playing together since early 2022, and they look to be able to play through all the way through 2024. Like 3 years with one set of 5 players hasn't really happened before, really at this high level. Certainly, Faker hasn't played with 4 consistent teammates for this long. Yes, he played with Bengi for a very long time. Bang and Wolf were there for a couple years, but for a consistent 5 to be there this long, that hasn't really happened before. I said before that I thought that this team could become maybe the greatest ever for how they were playing early in spring last year, and then of course they kind of faltered, but then eventually picked it up at the end when Faker came back. I'm still really interested to see if they attain that ceiling that they had last year, which I think I think it could be really interesting from a historical perspective to see a team win or almost win some championship in 3 different seasons, in 3 seasons that are somewhat different, especially when we got the item changes coming this year and the map being quite different. I think it would just be a testament to how great this team could be.
Do you think that that aspect of, obviously everyone was kind of flaming them before this Worlds because they used to lose a lot of the finals and obviously all the international finals. Do you think that winning this Worlds will like fundamentally change that and there'll be a different team going forwards?
I think so. I think Zeus was always a good enough player where I never thought he was going to end up like say like a Khan, even though he was kind of looking like that, especially after last year. I think it will be a monkey off his back for him. And he, as you know, he was arguably one of the best. He was definitely the best top laner through this Worlds. I think him and especially Owner, who are still relatively young, I think they'll be able to carry kind of that momentum through. I think it will actually be a question of how much Faker still kind of has it in him, because yes, there's the consistent narrative that he was the best player, but that's obviously not true. So it's all it kind of comes down to is how he's able to kind of lead to the team and play a supporting role. And if he can't really do that, then he doesn't really have a place in the team.
What do you think about this one, Matt? I think it's a pretty interesting move.
Yeah, I was just double checking like what they played at Worlds, because I think the most interesting thing about T1 is like Carrier, ADC, and like that's really when they popped off. And they losing each final, I think it was specifically to Gen.G, where Gen.G actually countered that. But at Worlds, like everyone played into T1 style at Worlds. Yes. So I think that kind of eliminates their like the burden of getting over that finals international performance.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's more comfortable for them, right?
Yeah. So like they didn't really face like a Gen.G caliber opponent, and when they played JDG, it looked like they were doing crazy shit again in the bot lane, and it was still like their meta. It was like back when T1 was like the spring one, like a year and a half ago. Like that was their meta, and they were the best at that time. But that's not what the meta is always going to be. And I don't know if winning Worlds is actually going to propel them into winning the next LCK split, because I think whoever gets to the finals this winter split or spring split, they might just fail again. So I don't know if I think there's some more risk to what they're doing.
Funny thing is, I can actually see both sides. I can see this as good and bad. Like one of the reasons why I think it's a bad move is because essentially what I find so strange about how they won Worlds is that actually would have been my advice to T1 in almost every final they've played. Like the craziest one to me is that MSI lower bracket one against BLG. Because it's like, what's weird is they've had this unique style in LCK that they try the whole time. And then bizarrely, they just abandon it whenever they would face like a tough time internationally. They would just say, fuck it, and then just mix and do what all the teams do, where you just make out like the brand new meta at the tournament is the meta. So they even did it at this Worlds, if people don't know. Like it was implied that it was actually losing the best of one in Swiss system to Gen.G that made them think like, actually playing the current meta, what everyone claimed it was, isn't that good. Why don't we just go with what our comfort picks are, which is all this weird shit we were picking before. So the stupid thing is, if they actually if this gives them the confidence of sort of we can set the meta, or rather we set the meta for ourselves, then in theory they always could have been number one. Like they did have an insane win rate. They were in all these finals. Like let's be real, this lineup's worst ever finish in any tournament is MSI, and they finished third. It's pretty fucking good. Like in theory they were always on the cusp of greatness. It's just for some reason, they had some sort of performance issue, and part of it even seemed to be that they short circuit themselves before the match. So there's that. But then my issue is, you can sort of break the streak, as it were, and then make a streak the other way where you super clutch, you win up. But I've got to see you do it is the problem. Like a streak of one isn't a streak. So if they can sort of like, put it this way, if they win LCK Spring and they do it in their own inimitable fashion and they look good and these players all hold up and Zeus is the best top laner and Carrier does his picks in the finals, then I'll start to get hyped and I'll be like, okay, this was a pretty cool one. My bigger issue is, it's kind of like what you said, Frisky, is no one does keep 5-man lineups together. Like people will forget, even when they won in season 5 and season 6, they changed top laner. Like that does change the dynamic of what you're doing. In fact, if you remember that one, they went from a top laner that used to demand the jungle attention to one that demanded no jungle attention when they went from Marin to Duke. So the fact you've changed no one does mean essentially this is like we're just polishing what we've got. Like we're going to keep what we've got. We already kind of know, like it's a known quantity, but we're just going to make sure we do get over this last hump. Whereas what people don't seem to understand when I say I would have gone for an upgrade is I think it's worth the gamble. Like, to me, you are sort of 50-50 if you're going to win any of these finals. If you had really gotten some stud, either ADC or jungle was the two positions I would go for. Like, imagine, like, look, I know the ruler one's probably out of the question because he's obviously on an enormous salary, but if you'd had a player like that, now you're even more dangerous, I think. So I would have done the gamble, but I don't hate them sticking with it. You have just won Worlds. Like I say, you always were just a hair from greatness, which is why, actually, I think people were so tunnel visioned on saying that they sucked when they lost, because I think all of us were waiting for them to win finally. And at the time, they only had the one LCK title out of like 4 tries. So it was a bit underwhelming. Any more thoughts on this one, Frisky?
I agree with a lot of that. I certainly would have found it interesting to see them change jungle and ADC, especially with some of the ADCs right now. Like if Viper went there, or heck, even if Deft went there, I think that would be pretty interesting. Because you have a player with a who's kind of the opposite of Gumayusi, who's looking to force his way in and be a little bit more of a hard carry, where Deft's obviously gonna be similar to Ruler and just want to be consistent with his kills and be consistent with his laning. And he had a very good season last year as well. Even though that the Damo team did make worlds, but I don't think they didn't make quarters. I remember. And then the jungle, you could have even. Who could have been? No, they could have put Canyon in. That would have been a mega change if we would have seen Canyon on T1, especially playing with Zeus. It would have been cool to see some of those. But yeah, just historically, just because it hasn't really happened before, to see a team play this long, I kind of enjoy to see that.
No, I agree. That's a unique narrative. And by the way, if they actually then do win everything, it'll be a super unique one. Yeah. Right. Matt, do you want to pick another team?
Well, I was going to say one more thing on the longevity of the team roster. Do you have any I know Gambit and CS:GO was the same lineup for 2 years as well?
No.
No.
Not
that was it.
I mean, as you mean, it was online and then went into Cloud9. Yeah, maybe about 2 years. Okay.
I just wonder if that
the longest ever, if you wonder, is Virtus Pro. It's the Polish one.
Okay.
They stayed together for they stayed together for 5 years in CS:GO.
Okay.
But the problem is, though, if you want to tie it into that, they had their biggest success at the beginning, and then what they did was they were an elite team, and they could always get back to say second in the world, third. But I think off the top of my head, I think people only considered them an unofficial world number one after the first year, maybe once. Aside from that, they were always say third or fourth. So that's actually a pretty good analogy, because my point is, it's why I say I would have gambled on the upgrade is, look, I'm not saying they're going to be a shit team. I expect they should be in contention for LCK. In theory, if everything goes well, they'll be in contention for MSI and Worlds. But the difference is, even though JDG didn't win it, when you just saw that roster on paper for JDG, you were like, holy shit. Dude, you could win everything with this roster. I look at the T1 one, and as I say, there's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of, I need things to go the right way. As I say, certain patterns haven't emerged yet. So I just think there's, as much as everyone cries in esports about you shouldn't kick players, you should just work through it. It's where are the examples? If anything, the examples are the exceptions that prove the rule, that usually roster moves how you upgrade, how you improve.
Yeah, exactly. So the next team I would like to go is K Corp, and more specifically it's the Yamato Cannon coach angle.
Yeah, so first of all, by the way, this is the roster, if people don't know, where obviously they have bought the Astralis slot, although it was one of those ones where I forget exactly if there was a percentage kept or whatever, but they bought the Astralis spot, didn't keep any of the players. They brought up their ERL team, which had Kabashad top, Sakan mid, and Targama support. And then what they did is they bought Bo and Upset, who obviously were previously in Vitality, to be the jungle and ADC. And as you say, the coach is going to be Yamato Cannon. So obviously a massive name coach in theory. So where are you at on this one, mate?
Well, on this one, I really like Yamato Cannon as a coach. He's kind of been the guy I've gone to since LS became less my style. So I think just how he styles and how he plays with the game, and just the way he interacts with players in his story, I think is really interesting. And I really like that he wants to do the bow carry jungle style. So I think that should be interesting. And I think if you have the carries as Bo and Upset, then I think that team can function pretty well through that. And the other players just need to be role players. So I think you can do that with these names probably.
What do you think, Frisky? Where you at on this one, mate?
I certainly like Yamato Cannon being the coach for Bo. I think he's kind of a good fit for what Bo needs, and I'm also a big fan of Yamato Cannon. I enjoy kind of how he thinks about the map and kind of how you take space on the map. It fits a lot of my philosophy. I'm just really happy to see Cabochon back in the LEC. I think how long has he been on K Corp, or at least he's been in the LSL for a couple of years. And he's always been a really enjoyable top laner. I remember his old Gambit days back in 2015 where he's playing pre-reworked Gangplank. Those were always super fun. And he was even really good before he went out of at the LEC. So I think it's just good to have him back. I'm not, because I didn't really watch LFL. I'm not. I know who Socket is, but I'm not really sure how like good he was, especially in a weaker league. I guess I'm not totally sure how he's going to play as well, and especially with how important mid is in the LEC. I guess that's maybe a little bit of an unsurety, but maybe one of the two of you can talk to me more about him.
I mean, the thing with him was he did briefly play in the LEC on an old Vitality roster, but that was the ones where they really were just cycling in like French players. It was always a nightmare. And so he was one of those people where they sort of bailed on him quickly when it didn't work, which used to be the LEC meta back then. So I would say, I think actually this is a perfect example of how ERL should work, which is if you have a talent that gets its chance and doesn't work out, this is obviously what happened to Checo Lad, he just never got a chance again. Then ideally you go back down a level, you play a few more years, you prove your skills, you whatever, get over whatever your issue is, and then you get another chance. So this is his sort of last chance, this real chance. If he can make it, he can make it. He's got pretty good teammates. So he was actually supposedly pretty good on K-Corp the whole time. They were one of the better LFL teams, except the year they had Reckless, so people don't know. I would say the thing with this team is that thing that I think is mega underrated is, so people will know that Yamato coached Upset when they were in Fnatic, but people might not know Yamato used to coach Cabochard on Vitality back in the day. And so first of all, already he knows how that player works. That's a player who can do both styles of top lane. I agree on the Bo angle. I think that's a mega one, because think about it. Not only did Yamato coach Razork, and Razork definitely for my money is like a player you want to allow to be a mechanical jungler, to be a carry jungler in certain times, but also if you remember those old Vitality teams that Yamato coached, where he used to have Gilius, he actually was one of the better coaches at enabling Gilius. So people don't know, Gilius used to do this, like I think it was like a level 3 gank like every game, and they would just set the team up to do that. So he could get the gank off for Jizuke or Cabochard or whatever and just get the team ahead how they wanted to get ahead. So I actually think if you look at the mix of players, yeah, there's some uncertainty. Like no one knows how Targamas will be compared to when he was in XL. Put it this way, the things I know behind the scenes about XL, I don't blame almost any player except if they just gave up in the server. Like there's a lot of shit went on in that team, guys. It was outrageous. And I also do think if you know Upset, he is going to lead the bot lane. So I think Targamas will just do his job and do what he's told to do. For me, Patrick's more of a chill character. And then the Saka one I can't know about, but I just think, it's like you say, Matt, if Bo and Upset really are unleashed and they can be like the best at their positions, dude, I think that's enough at this point in the LEC. Like this team can contend. I think this team can be a champion even. Still uncertainties, but I like the mix in general. I kind of like it's not like every player here is on Mega Box. I think they've done a good job making the roster personally. But if people don't know, that's also because they did sort of plan the last few years with some of these names. And I'm pretty sure they even told them, like, hang tight and basically we're just going to get the LEC spot. If not last year, then this year. And they just eventually got it. So they also had sort of built towards this. This isn't like, unlike some of the other rosters, they didn't really build this last minute as far as I know. Any more thoughts on this team?
I think I'm good there. Yep.
Okay, right. Pick another team then, Frisky. What team next, mate?
We'll go to the LPL this time. There's a couple of interesting ones, but I'll go for one with a decent amount of moves. I think is maybe the most interesting one, which is Top Esports.
Okay, so for people who don't know, in theory, they actually just completed this lineup. So they've ended up getting 369 from Gen.G. Obviously, he used to be a Top Esports player a long time ago. Tian remains, who's been there a while now. Cream, the mid of OMG, who was a team that people like Dom thought maybe could seal the last world spot, but didn't in the end. And then Jackie Love stays as ADC. And then Mako, long time support of EDG, has come over to complete the lineup. So in the end, a pretty interesting lineup. Where are you at on this one?
It's a really interesting lineup. Just a lot of very different pieces I wasn't expecting to play together. 369, obviously. I mean, maybe wasn't at the end the best top laner in the world, but throughout the year was at least top 3 top laners in the world. And before when he was on TES, which I think is 2020, and I think he was still on in 2021, or that might have been when Zoom came in. Yeah, he was he left because he was kind of shown to be very inconsistent and have a lot of choking problems. But I think his time on Gen.G, he's kind of gotten much better, and maybe still has got some issues, and in both worlds he kind of had some issues, but I think he's still proven himself. So I think that's a great pick. Cream is certainly the kind of one of the rising stars of the LPL. I think that OMG team, which Dom liked, which I also was a big fan of and was really sad that didn't make Worlds. The kind of main player on that team was Gen.G, but that was also because top lane is a role where you see less carry. So somebody who's kind of being more of an outlandish carry, like similar to the Shy. Gen.G was not the Shy at all, but just somebody who's more of a carry is going to be looked at more because you see less of those carries. Cream was a very consistent player, a very good mage player, but certainly could carry when his chance came. I'm really excited to see him here. You could still say it's a downgrade from Rookie, but Cream is still somebody I have a decent amount of faith in. And Mako, Jackie Love had a really good year last year. He hasn't played with. Geez, when was the last time he played with it? Has he ever played with a good support? Now that I think about it, you got Baolan, you got Yu Yanja, you got Joel is okay. Mark was, he hasn't, at least since he's been good, he hasn't really had like a stellar support. Nothing close to Mako though. And Mako is the perfect person for somebody like Jackie Love to have. Somebody like Jackie Love who's extremely aggressive and sometimes too unnecessarily aggressive. Mako has been played with people like that for years. I mean, remember, he was good enough to take iBoy to or was it one? It was one or two world championships in 2017 and 2018.
Sure.
And there's a reason we don't talk about iBoy anymore. And he was the kind of Chinese ADC who was over aggressive. Actually, I think he's Korean, but still, he played in China.
No, he's China.
Okay. But yeah, no, this roster is pretty exciting, but like before, I'm very, very questioning Tien. Tien is a jungler that I continue to kind of have hate on, kind of like Peanut, because it's just kind of a long history of, even if he does well in, it's been the last 2 or 3 years, he's done well in spring and summer, but anytime you get the playoffs, he just completely flames out. So to me, he's easily the biggest question here. But yeah, I think he's got some really stable pieces can work around. And if Mako's able to get Jackie Love to be able to carry every game, Tien's kind of potential to choke won't be as big of a deal.
What do you think, Matt?
I really like Kareem as a player. He's also known for like his 80 assassins. I think he played a ton of Kiana, and I think I like to see that in with like all the good players around him to see if they can play that way they did in OMG with those assassin picks. I think Tian is also like, I think the narrative is like he's always pretty good in the region, and then like international he has some issues. I think like Tian, he has high ups and downs, so I think the team should be fine. I don't know that much more about the bot lane. I know Jackie Love from Worlds, but I think the team seems pretty good. Seems like a top 3, top 5 LPL team.
The interesting thing about this one is it just shows how, until you know what the total roster is, it's really hard to judge moves in isolation, because people might know that when it was announced that 369 leaves Gen.G, so they weren't running it back, and then announced that he goes to top esports, but there's no Rookie. I think a lot of people like me were like, why has he done that? Like, he's just fucking in his career. And also, what's the point of top esports? So they kept Tian, you let Rookie go. Cream's like a good signing, but I don't, like I say, he doesn't have the peak of Rookie. He's obviously still like a rising performer. And by the way, now is when he actually has to show it. On OMG, that was sort of like a fun team. They did have a crazy style with some of the other players. This is just a normal professional team, and you have to prove you're one of the best, just pure mid laners. So I'll be certainly interested to see if he could do it. But I think when you see it, because the last piece to join was Mako, that does suddenly make this a really exciting team. Because if I look at the team now, like, first of all, I agree on the bot lane angle. Like, Jackie Love's never had, in my opinion, a truly elite support player, despite the fact China has loads of them. So you think of all those mega supports, and then you have just Jackie Love just chilling, never playing with one. So Mako, if people don't know, Mako was still really good last year. Like, EDG in spring was really good, and in summer, if they hadn't have had the whole drama with the ADC, maybe they could have been the 4th team or the 3rd team for China. Like, Mako's still a very good player, and also what an amazing tenure. So if you look at it, presumably, I assume he has shot calling components to his game. He's clearly going to be an interesting dynamic. But Jackie Love was amazing last season. I thought he was a total stud. So if you look at it, I think your top laner, your ADC, and your support support, in theory, are all in contention for best at their role. So then you got the Tian one, which, yeah, I'm with you. It's not in that he's a coin flip player. He either's just really good for a month or a few series, or he's just absolute shit. Like he has the crazy switch for some reason. So I have my concerns about that too. But I can sort of take that gamble if I've got so many other stable pieces. I even think for the cream guy, even though you've got professional pressure finally that you're in a top team, it's still not the same as being like the solo carry. Like you've got an amazing fucking bot laner here. So I think that this could work. Like I could really see this being like the second or third best team. I could see them sort of sneaking in there, even though, like I say, the offseason began as though they were going to end up with, a couple of good players, a couple of crap players, and it'd just be that scenario where you go 5th to 6th and you just miss out on Worlds again. So I would have liked it. Look, I would have loved this same lineup if it could have been Rookie just instead of Cream, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. I do agree. I actually think overall it's a pretty interesting roster.
Yeah, certainly. Cream never really has been in a position where he's like had to be like the solo carry. So it is nice that he kind of has a replacement for Gen.G in 369. I think that does take some pressure off of being a top team. And then I agree with you that like having Tien is still worrying, but at the same time, he's got a lot of really good solid players around him where I think he can take a brunt of if Tien kind of starts to.
By the way, if you've never noticed, beyond joking, it doesn't seem like actually within the Chinese player scene that any of them have a problem with Tian. So I also suspect, unfortunately, I imagine he probably is just like some scrim demon or something, and they all think he's really skilled. It actually reminds me of when I used to look when he actually also did have more problems. When I used to flame Kazi back in the day, people will know that the pro players didn't agree with me, mate. They all thought he was mega. Loads of them were actually trying to make super teams with him and get him to their squads, and hence why he was in Vitality. So I get the vibe there is something more to Tian that we're just not seeing in the games. Like, because here's the thing, I'm not Chinese and I don't have to care if he does well or not. So when I see him int, Knight or fucking Rookie, I get mad. But I assume behind the scenes he has some redeeming qualities I'm just not aware of, because bear in mind the last like 3 years supposedly even he's complained about like wrist issues. You'd think he just wouldn't get a spot anymore with all the skilled Chinese junglers. So in a way, I'm sort of inferring that there's potentially more hope on that front than maybe Westerners see. Right, go on then. What we doing next, Matt? Where are we going now?
I was going to go right back to Karzi's team of Vitality.
Let's do it.
I think the Karzi Hylissang lane proved really
quickly,
good.
If people don't know, what they do is they keep in Fort on the top laner. Douglas was the Polish jungler who they were bringing in at the end instead of Bo, if you remember. Vethio comes over from Heretics, and then they get the bot lane of Mad Lions, which is Karzi and Hylissang, and this team will be coached by not only Mac, but also Pad, that was his assistant coach in Mad Lions. So go on then, give me your thoughts, Matt.
Yeah, so I think the Karzi Hylissang lane was kind of like the boon of Mad Lions last year. I think Aloyoyo was a bit up and down, but I think the jungle and bot lane was kind of the strong point of Mad Lions. So Nitsky is a roamer, so he helps the bot lane. So I think like these two players are really good. I don't know how well Douglas will be in that position with this player, so I don't know how good the rest of the team is, but I would like to see Karzi and Hylissang perform like they did last year. Maybe they get a couple of good wins off this. I think Photon is always he showed prowess and has been good last season. It was like top lane last year, like winter spring. So I think the team is good, but I'm more curious on how Hylissang does, because I've been following Hylissang for a long time through the years.
What do you think?
I don't know. I don't have too many opinions on this one. Vethio isn't a player I was watching as much. I know I saw a lot of really good things when I did watch him, but I know he's had a lot of struggles before, especially in that when that XL team kind of failed, especially in the first couple splits. But I think from what I've heard, he's kind of picked himself up, and he's still a very skilled player. So, seeing him with other, good players is always a good thing. Karzi Hylissang, like Matt, I've followed Hylissang for so many years since he was on Unicorns of Love. Maybe if this was a couple years ago, and I guess they have played before, I would be a little bit more worried about the Karzi Hylissang, but I know Karzi is, kind of really upped his game. He's maybe not as good as Upset has been, but I still think this is a very good lane, especially with some of these maybe kind of weaker bot lanes in LEC right now. I feel like this could still be a very good lane.
I actually think this team is fire. I mean, I think I've been pretty clear on all the shows when I've been talking about it. Like, the key thing for me is, and you'll notice that a few of the LEC teams, this is now something I'm trying to factor in. I'm trying to bring the coach element into also how I then look at the players, because at the end of the day, like, the coach alone can't do it, but also what pieces does he have? Can he activate his style? Does he work well with them? So this is one where I've got to start with the coach. So the big thing is, I made a video recently. I didn't make my thoughts kind of, I didn't obscure them, did I? Like, I think Mac is mad underrated. I think people only tunnel vision once he wins LEC on the fact that he then didn't win another split or that he then failed internationally. It's like, yeah, but essentially what he did in that scenario was insanely overachieve. And then we're all acting like he's coaching G2 and he has Caps and he has Yankos and he has these mega massive studs. Whereas, first of all, you look at his teams, he almost never has studs. Like, okay, he had Kazi this year and El Yoya. He's had Humanoid in the past for a year. Before that, he had what? I mean, I'd say, like, in some of the past years, they didn't even have, like, one player that was the best in the league. So when you look at what he's actually done, I think he's had an insane track record. So when you look at the players he has, his specialty does seem to be, he is like the difficult/rookie whisperer who can go to these players and somehow get them to play to a level they sometimes just never do again. So the idea he just keeps his bottling is mega. If you saw how Kazi played, that looks awesome. The Vethio angle, I mean, again, this is a player you've seen was tricky when he went elsewhere, had to be managed even in Misfits, came to Heretics and looked good again, maybe not his absolute peak. Well, the good news there is you can just pick up the phone to your old mate Peter and ask him what he was doing last year. I'm sure he'll tell you. And then on the other two, the Douglas guy, I just heard people say he's just supposed to be good. He'd played in the RLs. Fair enough. I'll always give a jungler a chance. And I actually think, in light of everything I've just said about Mac, I actually think that the promise you saw in Photon, he might be the perfect coach to unleash that. Like, I thought Photon really individually did look like he could have been the best top laner in LEC. His problem was, I'm almost certain he has some sort of communication issues in the team. Like, he really did look like, once it got out of just laning and stuff like that, like, unless it was certain champions, he sometimes looked like he was disconnected from the team for me. It's one of the reasons why I thought the whole perks element was irrelevant. I don't think they could ever activate like his macro skills because the team was just never in position to, seemingly. So I actually think, even though it's maybe a bit of a sleeper with some of the names, like the top side of the map, I think this has a very good chance to be a contender. I think this will be in my top three, this team, especially because of the coaching angle. So I'm actually sort of secretly hyped on this one. Anything more? Are we swapping over? What are we doing?
I'm all good.
Over.
All right, go on then. Let's pick an LCK or LPL team.
Let's do Gen.G's roster.
Gen.G? Okay.
Yeah.
So if people don't know, this is what is now being described on paper as the super team, because basically they kept Pays, but they brought in Lehens from KT, who technically was the MVP of last split, if people don't know. Chovy remains, and they've added Canyon from Damwon, and then they brought in Keen from KT Rolster, who some people thought was maybe even the best top player in the world in summer. So on paper, not only is it very expensive, but it's a mega roster. Basically, aside from Pays, who just won 2 championships, everyone else has been like best in their role for years or contenders. So I'm guessing you're pretty excited by this one, Frisky?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty excited, especially from the top side to Keen. I think when that KT Rolster lineup was made last year, it wasn't necessarily like meant to be as big of contenders as they were. Because there's never really been a super successful jungler, especially in the last couple of years. BDD's never going to be somebody. He's never been somebody who's been as good as Chovy or Showmaker. He's just been very consistent in how he plays the lane and and how he roams down to the bot side. But now that they have, now that Gen.G has, Thorin had a good year last year, but Keen in summer was the best top laner in the world, and I think he should have gotten MVP. He has looked very good for many years. People have, at least finally somewhat seen that. I hope Western bozos don't see KT's Worlds performance and think that Keen wasn't that good. But I'm very excited to see Keen with a very heavy carry mid laner, especially like an aggressive carry mid laner like Chovy. Not aggressive, more aggressive than at least in BDD was. And I think Canyon is kind of the, how do you say it? He's the cherry on top for this team for me. I mean, he is one of the best junglers I think ever at this point. You can maybe say he's a top 5 jungler ever. I mean, every year, going back to 2019, he's had a good or great year. And I think last year was no different. That Damwon team certainly had some problems. Showmaker wasn't as good as he was. But, Def was still very good, and Canyon was probably the best player on that team. So to see him here with Chovy now instead of Showmaker and with Keen, it's just very exciting for me. Even just as a fan of LCK, just to see these players together is exciting. Well, Lehens is definitely the one question, especially because he had a good year last year. He worked really well with aiming, but he's, a downgrade from Delight, because Delight was probably the second best support in the region besides Keria. So he's maybe like one of the questions. He can, sometimes pull the trigger down and get a little bit too inty. I don't really think he deserved to win MVP, even though he had a good year. But I think even then, a lot of these players, like, I have very high expectations for Canyon to have a good year almost no matter what. He's almost a player that, I've never really seen a bad year from him. So it's hard for me to say like he could fail.
I think what might be missed here is the champ pools of these players are kind of huge. I know Keen is a really huge champ pool. The Hens lets to play crazy stuff, and Canyon and Showmaker did all sorts of weird stuff the last couple of years. So, and then Chovy's like the best player, so I'm sure he can play everything. So the comps and the styles that this team can potentially play is huge.
I think the most underrated part of this lineup to me, because look, you almost can't overrate the names. Like, the names are fucking mega. The joke is, this is actually one of the first real super teams we've ever had. Like, most of the time when people say super team, it's more like, 3 names are really big, and that's like, hey, and the other 2 aren't that bad. Like, this, aside from, the joke is, like, in theory, I should say it appears by experience, but it's actually Lehens. Like, I just think most people think he wasn't ever the best support. Everyone else is a banger on this one. Like, the peak potential is insane. But the more important thing to me, I actually think, is what you say at the end there, Matt, which is, I think people are overlooking this aspect. To me, the entire mission of Gen.G is we have Chovy, who really could be like the best League of Legends player, not just in the world, ever. Like, his skills are impossibly good. But he clearly does have some sort of failings, or he's just not as elite at certain other aspects of the game. And so I think if you put players around him, and I think that's exactly what you've done here, who essentially, they know how to play the game. They have their own way of playing the game. Like, I could just see him just coexisting as just a godlike mid laner, and then look at the rest of his team, mate. Like, he's got arguably the best top lane, especially the best carry top lane in Korea. I thought him and Zeus all year were going back and forth. Then you have the whole thing, like, Canyon can just be a complete stud. He can just be the absolute best jungler in the whole world, potentially. Some would say the best mechanical jungler ever. You've got fucking Pays looked great on the old team. Might not even have to do as much on this one. And the Lehens one, look, it's another player where, for some reason in the Korean scene, they hold him in much higher regard than I do. So I assume there is something to that. Makes me think maybe he's some sort of fucking wizard in scrims, or maybe he has some shot calling component himself. It's usually the sort of thing that gives people this hype. I'm thinking, my analogy, if you're a Westerner, would be, if you know the stories about Yellowstar, we all hold him in insane regard. But I could imagine some Korean player watching Yellowstar in the server and being like, what the fuck? This is the guy who says the God support. So I'm imagining there's something there. So to me, it's actually the Chovy angle I find the most exciting. Like, this is one of the first times ever I think every player should be really good. And I get the sense he doesn't have to do any of that shit of like, oh, he's got to learn this, that, and that. I think it's just to play mid lane, mate. I think with these players, if it goes well, you almost just autopilot this team. It looks mega. Actually, genuinely, one of the most exciting rosters I've ever seen. I'm amazed people haven't even done this as well. Not only, to me, it's just that T1 won World, so people in their brain have to believe T1's the best. Like, I look at this Gen.G roster, and my first thought immediately is, holy shit, they've got their chance to do what JDG could have done. Can't they just win everything? Couldn't this team just win both LCK, MSI, and Worlds? Like, that seems plausible to me.
It absolutely seems plausible. Chovy, like you said, he could be the best player ever. At least, I think he might be the player who I've seen have. I think he might be the player who I think has the highest potential to be as good as Faker has been ever. I think as good as Rookie's been, I think Chovy has a little bit more when it comes to that kind of extra kill factor in fights. His lane dominance is obviously LS likes to very much boast about how good he is at CSing, which does make a big difference, especially in LCK. It's unfortunate that he's had a couple, or not even couple, multiples, since going back to Griffin, choking scenarios where he's kind of, tarnished what should be an already amazing legacy. He's had I think 3 or 4 LCK titles, which is great, and then multiple other seconds to come with that. This team, like you said, really, I do think people aren't talking about it enough. Maybe it's because it wasn't like, maybe people just don't understand how good Keen was, or maybe they don't think Canyon is good anymore. But you're right, this team, I think, should be considered on the same level as JDG, as having the potential to be, one of the great teams ever, especially if they decide to dominate both LCK splits.
One of the weird things you'll notice that happens in League is people don't acknowledge how the game of League of Legends is really restrictive based on like teammate level, which is a bit strange if you think about it, because that's all everyone complains about in solo queue. They never ever agree that they did something wrong to lose the game. It's always their teammates' fault. But then we look at pro players and we act like they can all play their 10 out of 10 games. So the weirdest one to me is the reason I actually think people haven't gone crazy on this one is, one, Westerners just don't know Keen, like you say, so they just think, who cares on that one? And then I also do think for real that if they've seen Canyon, they're thinking, he's washed though. But it's like, mate, of all the roles, jungle especially, surely there's a role where you can airdrop someone out of a bad scenario, put them in a good one, and they really can just become amazing again. I mean, if people don't know, I would say that has happened in the careers of people like Peanut, Tarzan, some of these players. Like, I would say it's the ultimate role where you can look shit in one team and great in the next. So I actually just think people are doing that thing where they're going off last splits form for some of these players, whereas I'm sort of resetting. I mean, for a start off, even jungle's changed, hasn't it? The bloody map's changed. So I think I'm amazed that people are finding so many downsides. Yeah, the team hasn't played together. You can have that, but everything else to me looks great until I see otherwise in the server. I'm super psyched. Like, in a way, like I say, JDG went away for me, but now I got this Gen.G team. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was curious on, has Keen won anything in the LCK? Or has he always been second, third?
Never
the
has.
problem was he was on Freaks before, and then now he's on KT, and obviously those are the teams that historically just don't win much. So, No, he's been to Worlds a couple of times. I mean, I would say at times he has looked like a bit of a choker in playoff scenarios, but he also hasn't been in too many. Sadly, he did that stupid thing like Summit did, where they just languished on semi-shit teams for years and years and years and years, wasting like actual prime years of their career. So I still think he could come good, as it were.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to swap, picking another team.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go to LPL. I wanted to talk about Rookie's new team. I know some of the other names. I know Photic. Well,
okay, so for people who don't know, the team is Shanji and Aki, who were OMG players. Rookie obviously was on top Esports. I actually forget who Photic played for before. It was one of the lower teams, I think. And then Zhu is the support. So these are all known players. It's just obviously Rookie's name is just dwarfs everyone else's, is like way higher up. And the team is obviously Ninjas in Pyjamas, which used to be Victory 5, if people remember, which ironically actually Rookie was in the past. And then it got rebranded to Ninjas in Pyjamas when that European org, like whatever, did some sort of deal with them. So what are your initial thoughts on this team, mate? You're a Rookie fan essentially, right?
Yeah.
Just quick thing. Photic actually has played with Rookie before. He was on they were V5, so he's been on this team since 2021. So he's actually got experience with Rookie.
Yeah,
right.
And
there you go.
V5 also was like they were like in first for a couple of weeks, and right,
yeah,
they were doing really
back
good
when they had that
time.
rich guy on Dignitas, if people remember.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but so I think OMG being like the 5th, 6th place team both last splits, I think Shanji and Aki have like some proof that they're pretty good. And then playing Rookie with that top side, and I know Photic has the history and is kind of good. And then Frisky said earlier that Jewel is like not a decent player. So I think the team's quality is high, and like you just have Rookie on your team. So I think looking at like how the rest of the team plays, and Rookie always being a good mid laner, I think mid lane is still always going to be dominant. So I think they have a good reason to be near the top here. And Sanji had his Jackson, his Rumble were like godlike, so always fun to watch those.
Come on, hit me with it, Frisky. Where we're going on this one, mate?
Yeah, this is a really interesting team too. Just a bunch of for a couple of these teams that kind of have a collection of big names like Top Esports and Gen.G. This team's got a bit of a mix. Obviously, Rookie's going to make any team kind of more because of how big of a name he is. But yeah, like Matt said, Gen.G and Aki have, I think, proved themselves, especially Gen.G with how good he has been. And I still think he's, from what I've seen, his ceiling can continue to get higher. I think having Rookie in the mid lane is going to continue. I don't think he'll need as much carry burden, as good as Cream was, he's not Rookie's, level or Rookie's pedigree. So I think, that may take some nerves off of him. Aki was a really good kind of topside solo lane jungler last time, and I think he was I think he was a decent jungler. I think he's got some room for improvement. He made some mistakes, but I think he's definitely in a good place, and I think he fits into this team. Fotik, like Matt said, has proved to be good before. He was never amazing, but yeah, V5 did do very well for a long time. They were in first place for a while. They did have a very good split finish. I think they got second at one point. And Fotik did look very good during that. Zoro, is a decent player. He didn't really work well, at least to get as much out of Jackie Love as he could have. I think Fotik will probably be a better fit for him, somebody who's a bit less aggressive. So I like this team. I mean, just by looking at the other rosters, just, curious as to how JDG's roster would go and how EDG's roster can go. I think this is a team that can easily make Worlds.
I think this is a tough one for me because the problem is the potential of some of the players is good. I actually think top mid and ADC are all very legit players. The problem is when they actually did do that V5 run that you referenced earlier, where bizarrely they were first in the spring split of 2022. Fotik was one of the reasons. He actually was looking like a very good ADC. Again, you thought, wow, Chinese develops these players. But that team, if people remember, did collapse. Now, true, I do think it also collapsed from the top side of the map, basically minus Rookie. But when I look at this squad, the real question I have is just more how do you blend these styles? That style that Gen.G had was amazing on OMG, but that was a team that just seemed like they went all in on that crazy style. I don't know that you're going to play that style when you have these players at mid and ADC. Then I just didn't, unsurprisingly, Nip wasn't the team I was focused on in terms of this particular bot lane this season. If people don't know, Nip barely crept in the playoffs. They weren't a particularly relevant team most of the year. So it's more jungle has a bit of a question mark for me. For some reason, if you're Rookie, you're never allowed to just have a super team. You always have to have some flaw. Even the idea you have the crazy player top lane again, if you're Rookie, it's fucking hell, this guy knows how to pick him, doesn't he? He's like the LS of players. I always tell S, your biggest problem is you are fucking garbage at picking your friends and co-workers, but the joke is he doesn't know that, does he? So he just keeps doing the same thing. So for whatever reason, Rookie again could potentially get inted/fucked over. I've just accepted though, as someone who enjoys Rookie's career, here's the thing, it doesn't affect my life if he makes it the Worlds or not. So I hope he does, but I'd hope he just plays well individually again. I'm just going to enjoy it. At least this team, it doesn't really have a massive hole on it. There's not really any reason for me to be bombed out. Thing is though, I think I would sort of agree with the last sentiment, which is, look, there are a lot of strong teams in the LPL, but this is a team where if you know how the year works, it really is just about either being that last playoff run or just have the points for the regional, and the miracles happen in this region. So you really can, at the very end, just be the team that comes out of nowhere, even if you were never top four the whole year, and just steal that last fourth spot. So yeah, they would be one of the teams that could do that. If I look at the other rosters though, the difference is there's other rosters that have much more certain, sort of sure things on paper. So I'll definitely have a little bit of skepticism until I see this roster do something. Where are we going now?
There's a couple. I'll do a bit of a more interesting one because I think this team is kind of weird and interesting. Let's do KT's roster.
Okay, so if people don't know, this is actually quite a shocking one because essentially they've put together 3 players from DRX that won, which is Pureshik, who come back from Team Liquid. Deft and Beryl have reunited in bot lane. BDD just stayed. And then cause Keen's gone, they've got a player called Perfect, who I think was I believe, was he a challenger player or something before? I think
yes,
that was implied that he was on the challenger team. So essentially, 4 of the players I mean, the joke is 3 of them have won Worlds. And obviously, it's only really the Perfect players, the uncertain one. So where are you going at on this one? What's interesting about this for you? I know a lot of people actually have flamed this lineup, Frisky.
I mean, I think there's been a lot of deserving to flame this lineup. I think people saw Pioshik in LCS last year and realized that, this player who just won Worlds isn't actually that good, which he wasn't that good at Worlds, but, people don't really understand that. I think just seeing him back in the LCK is going to be kind of interesting, especially with a mid laner like BDD. Those two do not mix, in my opinion. Pyjamas, who is way more aggressive and kind of sporadic in where he decides to roam, versus BDD, who likes consistency, likes consistent laning. And I think Cuz worked a little bit better for that, even though Cuz wasn't very good. I don't super love that mix. Deft being here with Beryl again. Beryl's, I don't know. My opinion on Beryl continues to change. When he was on Damwon, I was really kind of allotting him, thinking he was very good. Now, after the last couple of years, I'm not super high on him anymore. I mean, he's still a good player, but I think there's just other better supports. But I think he works well with Deft, so I don't think that would be a bad pairing. But the reason I just find this roster interesting is because I just think it's overall a downgrade. And I think because of how uncertain the mid laner is, or not mid laner, excuse me, top laner, of, Pyjamas kind of having to re-get used to a LCK style. I think there's a chance that this team could utterly collapse. And if, people will figure out this because they won Worlds. They were, that DRX team that had Pyjamas in it was either 9th or 10th spring split. And then they got, what'd they get? Like 6th or 5th in summer, and then just happened to make a miracle run through the gauntlet to get to World. So, most of the year, most of the last couple of years, Pyjamas hasn't been very good. So I think there's just a high chance that he honestly tanks this team, which is just sad. It's just a sad point for me because I loved this KT team last year. They might have been my favorite LCK team. I loved aiming. I loved, Keen finally being on a good team. So I think it's just, kind of, I think they're kind of going off the hype of, we're getting all the players who won Worlds back together, but I don't think it's going to work how they wanted to.
What do you think, Matt?
So I watched like little to zero LCK last year. I do know BDD and Def just by their historic names. I know BDD changed the style a little bit from like when he like debuted, and he's like been up and down. It's like was really, really high. Like I think last 2 springs ago or last 2 Worlds ago. So I think just the KT like dropping the roster that was apparently first all team is kind of sad, but they still have some good players.
I mean, to me, I actually think the problem is I can see why people meme on the roster. Like, first of all, they just don't know anything about the top lane. Like, I don't watch Korean challenges. Spoiler, no one does. You can all lie and tell me you're going to watch T1 for Reckless. But I think people are even lying on that one, guys, because he's going to be playing shit like Janna support. Like, are you really tuning in to watch fucking 9 players you don't care about and a player playing Janna support? I don't believe that. So, okay, since we all know no one watches it, I mean, when I look it up, this guy is like a carry top lane, as far as I can tell. He plays all the champions you'd want, all the elite Asian top lanes to play, the Jace and the Jacks and all. So, okay, that's interesting. Maybe he's going to be some stud. If people don't know, I know, for example, the D+ jungler that got promoted, Lucid, people do think he's going to be a stud, actually. So maybe this guy could be good. So I'll never write off a potentially promising rookie from LPL or LCK because those have a habit within the first year of becoming the best players in the world. So that's an interesting angle, but I just can't know if he's good or not. Pyjamas, I actually personally was never in on this guy. Like, if people remember back in the day when he was on the DRX team with fucking Deft and Chovy, I thought him and that fucking Morgan guy were the most serial inters of all time. Like, they were criminal what they were doing. And the joke is Beryl was fucking around back then, wasn't he? So I don't know. The problem is there are some memes on this team. With that said, I mean, Pyjamas obviously to me, he's one of those junglers where the issue is, I think he does cap your team a bit, but he has his champions. People know he has his champions he can play. BDD, I think, is actually criminally underrated at this point in time. He is a very good player the last few years. His problem was, as my infamous argument with LS will highlight, I think there was years when he was quite overrated. Now, I think, if anything, he's been underrated. Like, even on this KT team, people were flaming the fuck out of him. It was more people like Keen that had shit fucking Worlds. Like, I thought BDD was fine. Like, he was just pretty good. He was very good at times in the split. Like, if you go back to spring and summer, at times he was mega. So I have no problems keeping him. Deft, I actually think, had a sort of sleeper year. It's just the problem is the rest of Damwon didn't want to fucking play League of Legends, so he didn't look like he was good, but he almost certainly could have done something if he'd been on like a better team. So I've no problem. Like, Deft and BDD are bangers. Beryl, I mean, the problem with him is he in theory, he's supposed to be the ultimate, like, you have to know Korean / what goes on behind the scenes, because there's a reason me and Monty have essentially made him like a fucking meme. Like, There's something weird about this guy. Not only does he do all that weird shit in the game, but then even his attitude, like he does for some reason have this weird swagger that I don't really understand. It's like he really do. Like the joke is, you would think from the way people, from the way his attitude is, you would think Beryl was Kerrier and Kerrier was Beryl. It was the other way around. Like you'd think it was Kerrier that was the one who has like stupid build paths or plays champions that shouldn't really be played right now, and it's kind of a bit sus on them, or maybe got carried to a win. Like, but bizarrely, they have like the opposite personalities. Like Kerrier always seems like he's shy and a bit, insecure and doesn't know if he should pick his picks. Whereas Beryl really does have that quality that I actually low-key am not a huge fan of, which is like, I almost think he like ints you or picks something stupid, and then when he laughs, he isn't just doing it. It's like, I think he actually thinks that's funny. Like, haha, I've hinted you. And I hate people like that, by the way. Not just in the game, but in teams in general. It's not my style. I want people to sort of be no-lifers and want to win more than anything. So I just think it's a weird team. I don't really understand the construction of this team. Like, even the good pieces don't really seem to fit super awesome with the other ones. And the whole angle of like, but 3 of them won worlds. Yeah, on the team that I'm pretty sure, like we were talking about earlier, like most people acknowledge is complete bullshit that they won worlds. So to me, the issue here is you should still be a good team in LCK. There's enough parts here. It's just that, to me, this is more like a team where it's like, see if you can get the 4th LCK slot for Worlds. Like, I don't think this team can be in the finals or can win anything. It's a bit of a bomber in that sense, actually. Like, even if I try and think of basically this perfect guy will have to actually be like a top 3 top laner. If he could do that, then maybe we'll cook it with gas. And maybe I've underrated the team. But I find it a bit of an underwhelming squad. I don't really know what they were going for. Kind of confused.
Yeah, I was just kind of confused with them too. And if anyone uses it would actually be funny if anyone uses will these players won Worlds lineup? Because if you're using the excuse of you saw these players at Worlds, then your logic is still flawed. Because if you just look at the finals, the player who got the MVP was Kingden, and then the player who was best throughout the whole tournament was Zeka, and neither of them are there, so you can't use the Worlds argument. I think I'm thinking this roster. I think of it similar to this Damwon roster too, where they're just kind of, it's not as exciting as it seems. I mean, people are up on Lucid, but I'm not sure how he's going to play. I do think this though. I think one between D+ and KT Rolster, I think one of them will sink and one of them will swim.
Right, where we're going now, Matt?
I don't have like a necessary team of the LEC, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Niski downgrading essentially and Crownie being out.
Okay. I mean, I can give you some insight there, mate. This is where I can give, like, look, the joke is, I always say this, like, no one fucking listens to these, so they don't know. Sometimes I just straight up shit from behind the scenes that isn't on my shows. I'll just tell you straight up, as far as I know, the reason why Crowley isn't in that team anymore is legitimately the team does actually think that he fell off as the year went on and that he only had like a one way of playing, and they weren't as big fans of it. Spoiler, the coaching staff is French. People like Nuke and Adam, the solo laners, are French, so there's an obvious bias there. I mean, look, the bias isn't unwarranted. Like, they can obviously speak to those players in French. Some of those players come from ERL teams they were on in the past, potentially. So I get that angle. And I do think in general, the coaching staff of BDS seems pretty good. I do think this move is mental, though, to just keep the same team but swap out what for me was like a top 2 support in the region. I think that is bonkers. And then what was the Niski one? The Niski one, as far as I know, is just this bizarre story that goes like this. It goes like this, because if you don't know, Ibai, formerly of Koi, got involved with Mad Lions now, supposedly. And Ibai is supposedly like pals with El Yoya. And so El Yoya is under a lot of pressure to stay in this team, because if he leaves, that legion of Spanish fans either won't be fucking with him or might even hate on him. So he stays, and then supposedly he's like pals with the fucking coach of the Movistar Riders team, which is essentially, people don't know, like this team, like essentially like the mid and bot lane were all from Movistar Riders. So it's like El Yoya's just been added to Movistar Riders, and then they've added a top laner, I think. And so to me, this is just a bunch of massive downgrades based on stupid nepotistic Spanish bullshit. So I can't handle it, mate. So as far as I know, this has nothing to do with the notion that Fresky is going to be better than Niski. I think that's an absurd notion. I think just genuinely, they didn't care about keeping Mac as the coach. They didn't care about keeping Niski, and as a result, they've let him go. It is a bit bizarre, and Niski's going to be on SK Gaming. Like, that just seemed like, look, it's not like SK Gaming has no money, but if he's their big name to spend on, well, you can see the other names are just kind of whatever, aren't they? So I'm kind of shocked by it in general. Like, you look at some of the other squads, it looks like that, quite frankly, some of the fucking mid and ADC position recruitments especially seem incredibly cynical to me, either just based on nationality or saving money on a rookie contract. Because to me, Crownie and Niski, look, they don't have to be in G2, but it's a slam dunk they should be on a contender, surely. Like, haven't they done enough to earn that? I mean, but I thought both of them could have been like a split MVP last year, or this year, rather.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, sad to see them not on good teams. Yep.
Oh, and also on the Crownie one, I'll just throw this out there. He is another player that is like I've been talking about this offseason. His benefit now is this. Look, if he wants to play, he should go to an ERL team. Then he can play tomorrow. But if you do that, you won't be on that enormous BDS contract. So instead what you do is you just chill because you're in Germany. You get your money from BDS and you either wait and you hope that it fucks up and they beg you to come back. That's the dream scenario. Or you wait until another team decides, like in the middle of the split, like, oh, let's try and upgrade at ADC. And then they buy Crownie for however much the buyout is. So it's not implausible he comes back at some point in 2024, a la Upset or Wonder. Any other thoughts on one of these teams or these players? You have any thoughts?
Not a ton. I mean, I think Crownie has been an exceptional player last year, and I mean, since 2020, he's had a lot of really good years, and just hasn't really gotten good teams, which is just kind of sad. And I think Niski has had, a lot of ups and downs in his careers, but I still think he's had a lot of good points. I mean, I think he'll get underrated as a mid laner because of the other mid laners there. Caps and perks are always going to kind of take most of the attention. But I certainly think downgrading Niski is a big mistake. And, I think there is maybe there might be some nepotistic Spanish idea that Mad Lions is going for us, which I'm not a fan of either.
Oh, and then the other thing to say is as well, there is also the aspect that I know this might sound mad, but unfortunately, just like pleb fans, there are some coaches and GMs who mega tunnel vision on Worlds. So because at Worlds, Crownie did look a bit shit and the meta completely abandoned him. I think for real, some of them really are just like, right, see, he was the weak point and then they kick him in that reason. Whereas the joke is, obviously the one I think's fucking a mad trash can overrated player is Adam, the top laner. And the irony is, World slapped him in his face with the meta. Like, you could even actually in the meta play fucking Garen, which he used to play as like a meme champion. And so it's almost like, the joke is World's almost conspired to make Crownie look shit and Adam look good. And even then, by the way, I don't know how good he really looked in the actual main event. So I put it this way, one thing I didn't do before is I didn't give like my actual sort of projection for this team. Like Mad Lions, by the way, I actually think will just flat out be the 10th best team in the LEC. I think that's absolute dog shit, that roster. The BDS one, I think it's more like, personally, I think this is the split where Nuclear Int just, now you'll just see he's just an average mid laner. So since CEO had like one split where he looked good, like I don't think there's much in this team, boys. I actually think this team for real, BDS could be like 8th or 9th. I could see it being bad. I know that other people are going to think I'm down valuing those players. Well, yeah, I am then. I actually just think it wasn't. And I never thought they had the best players on the team. And I thought one of the best ones was Crownie. So I think it's a mega int. I think they fucked the whole team up. But like I say, maybe there's a world where they play a split, it goes to shit, and then they just beg Crownie to come back since they're paying him anyway. It's not implausible we can get that team back together. Do you have an angle? It doesn't have to be a team. If you want, it could be a specific topic. Where do you want to pivot to now, Frisky?
I guess I was kind of going to go to.
So go on.
I was kind of going to go with the team, but I guess I can kind of go with the angle too, since it's kind of a smaller move. But I can just kind of talk about the Knight and Yagao switching teams.
Okay, so basically, if people don't know, I mean, they've actually done it many times in the past, obviously. Knight and Yagao have now swapped between Gen.G and Billy. So Knight goes over to join Billy, who has the exact same team, except the rumour is, do they keep on as a support or is Lumao going to be there? Aside from that, it's the same team, but just with Knight. And then Gen.G, obviously Yagao goes back to where he used to play for many years, but now he's going to have Flandre as his top laner. And then the rest of the team is the team from the Grand Slam attempt. So two quite interesting rosters in their own right. What's your angle on these ones? What are you feeling about these?
Well, just from the history of these two players, it's mind-boggling to me that these two have as many like run-ins with each other that they do. Just from top teams, and they really do almost have like an anime kind of connection with, they were JDG top esports back in 2020. They were they on the, well, yeah, they were still on JDG and top esports in 2022 as well when they both went to Worlds. Of course, they were the top 2 teams last year, and now they're just switching teams, which my guess is, JDG just, not having, I guess, as the money to, pay Knight, and, they just figured, they can get Yagao back. So clearly, I think BLG is really looking to go for the home run with this team. I mean, this team was very good. They did end the split number 1. I think Yagao was probably the weakest player on BLG, although he did have a decent year. He's just never been that good of a player. He's just never been amazing. He's just always kind of lucked out and been on good teams and just kind of fit his role really well. But, I think having Knight on this team, just from studying sports and studying other teams, I just see Knight and I just get worried because, an upgrade like this and as big a name Knight is, I just feel like I'm worried about this team failing. But if everything goes well, this team is, I think, an easy shot to win the league and win Worlds, if all players play well. I mean, Ben was the best top in LPL last year. June was a very, very good jungler. He just, proved me wrong last year, especially from his bad years at IG. Elk is a fan favorite of mine. I thought he had an amazing year last year. Yes, he had a bad Worlds, but the team still kind of performed well, even though he didn't do great. And they did also add Lumao back, who used to be on JDG, but, they still have On, who's also, developed into really competent support, and he's worked really well with Elk. So just by looking at this BLG team, Knight should fit in, really well. I mean, he's not like somebody who needs a specific style. He's somebody who's good enough to kind of play with his team around with his teammates' need, and then carry the game at the same time. So there's a plenty of chance that Knight is the extra kind of edge that BLG needs to get to a championship.
What do you think, Matt?
JDG and Billy Beal were like the top 2 teams again. They essentially just switched mid laners, right? So I mean, Knight has always been good. The guy has been to a bunch of international tournaments. I don't necessarily remember his play. I've watched like the Knight highlights and stuff and seen like he's like the MVP of China essentially, but I don't really have much more to say. I think the teams are going to be good each again. To swap the mid laners, right? Seems good to me.
I mean, what I would say is, to me, the analogy, if you only are watching Western League, is Yagao is the Niski if Knight is Caps, if you get the analogy. So like one of them should be better. One is the more skilled player, but the other one has like seemingly like intangibles about how he works with his teammates, seems like a great guy. I mean, pretty sweet, just like Niski. Every Yagao lineup does seem to be better than I expect it to be. Even when I look at the roster, I'm like, these aren't the absolute best players. He just does. Seems to be essentially like, I wouldn't say like a winner, but he just seems to be a very positive addition to any team. It's just the issue is kind of like the Niski angle is if you put him against the absolute best player in the world, will he outperform him? Probably not. But then his team could win. So I think that's a cool angle. So the interesting thing on both these angles to me is JDG can still be a really good squad. I mean, look at them. They've got like the fucking killer bot lane with Ruler still. Kanavi's a stud jungler. He definitely has games where he can just carry against anyone. Flandre is not exactly a bot. He's obviously a mega veteran. And Yagao seems like a good team player. I think it'll be a very different JDG though. That's the thing for me. And then on the Billy one, I'm very hyped about this one. I think this is a fabulous roster. Like, the difference is, when I was talking earlier about, I mean, Knight's also had it minus this last JDG lineup, where his lineups are never perfect. It's like there's always 1 or 1.5 holes in the team, and you just wonder, when will that hole open up? When will there be a problem? When will this person int? Whereas when I look at this roster, with the exception of occasional issues you might get out of support, I think it's a pretty fucking strong team. Like, these really are the best players in China, if people don't know. Like, obviously, you're going to be on a downgrade when you leave a JDG super team that might be the best team ever. But of all the teams to go to, this is some pretty fucking good players. Like, this is another team where you can just play default League of Legends and most of these players should be studs. I mean, just think about if Sean does his job and he can be a really strong jungler, think how fucking strong his solo laners are. Like, these guys can carry out a lot of lanes on this team. So I'm very excited. I don't know how it'll work in terms of the dynamics, but I'll just do what I've done every fucking year for the last 3 years and just double down and say, right, Knight's going to win Worlds this time. And then I'll just have to scramble and make all my excuses like all the trophy fans do every year. It's all good. What are we pivoting to now, boys? One more topic. Let's do one more.
You could go Frisky if you
go. Yeah, go on. Pick one.
We could maybe, because I think it's an interesting topic, smaller one. We could talk about just the implication of Reckless going to T1, because I think it's a huge step.
I mean, I think we have a different take on this then. Why do you think it's a huge step?
Well, I just think because it's the first time, a Western player has kind of gone. Well, yeah, I think it's the first time a Western player has kind of gone to a stronger region. I mean, that doesn't really happen in the West. You don't really get North American players going up to Europe. You never get Europe players going up to China and Korea. And I think it's just, I think it's a really cool move that Reckless is just like, I still want to win, so I'm going to go, try to be in, arguably the best region in the world. Probably not, compared to the LPL, but still go to one of the best teams. And I just think it's really cool, and could, I think it could be an interesting window to Western players maybe crossing the East more if they're looking for more chances to win. I'm not sure.
Here's my issue, right? It goes like this. And here's the thing. People will notice. What they probably don't know is when I clown on people on shows, that's because I know that player or that personality and they can handle it, or they'll take it as good natured. So I'm not going to clown on you, but I'll just say it this way, Frisky. The problem is he hasn't gone to a top team. He's gone to the Challenger League of Korea, which, as I've said, none of us watch. None of us watch the Challenger League. So my issue is this. People really are acting like he's fucking carrier now or something like he's on T1. He isn't on T1. He plays, like, if someone went and joined Vitality B, would we act like they're ever going to be in the LEC? No, they're just a fucking academy team / ERL team of Vitality. Like, they might never do anything there. So the weirdest thing to me is I actually don't even think that is the storyline, though, mate. Like, as far as I can tell, what he's done is he's chosen not to compete, because competing would be take, like, an LEC spot and actually try and go to Worlds again, or... I mean, if you're going to swap roles, you should probably go to the RLs, if I'm being honest, to improve yourself there and then come back next year or in a split and then get on a top team and try and do it again. To me, this is actually just a cynical move from everyone, I think. Like, I think it allows Reckless to have a bit of exposure but never have to actually compete in proper play. He'll never be on the T1 main team. That's not even plausible, with the exception of, like, if they'd won every game and there was 2 series left against the worst in the league. Maybe as like a meme they might insert him for the fucking drama. But there's no universe where he's going to play for T1. I don't think there's any universe where he ever plays in an LCK team. I don't think look, the bad teams might have him for marketing, but I don't think anyone's watching him play in Challenger and go, yeah, get this guy on the main team. And so unfortunately, I know what you mean. If this, put it this way, let me give you the analogy. Let's say Crowley doesn't get his gig in BDS, so Frederick Brion signs Crowley. Now, that would be the move you're describing, and that would be very exciting, because as you say, then suddenly has this opened the door to other players going there? Will it actually mean, like, Crowley could now, like, an outside shot to make it work? That would be sick. He actually is playing, against Deft and against fucking Gumayushi and against Pace. That would be hype. My problem is, I don't know anyone who's in fucking Korean challenges. I don't think anyone does. We'll only be watching for this novelty reason. And as I say, I actually think even watching for novelty reasons, most of you won't. You'll watch the first game and then realise, oh wait, I'm watching a guy who used to be awesome at ADC play support, and since he is the most fucking defensive bot laner ever, dude, it's going to be a nightmare watching this guy play support. Like, in the modern day, support's about, like, tank for your fucking ADC, like, control the lane, go all in on kill prep. Like, this is all the shit this guy never would do when he was the ADC with all the fucking sums and all the strength. So I actually, look, it's one of the ones I'm going to actually have to hard disagree. I actually think this move is garbage. Like, I'm amazed everyone's so hyped for it. As I say, if it was a real LCK team, I would be in on it as well. This would be like Nanawa goes to Korea. The problem here is, like, this is like if Nanawa went to Korea and they just played in some small league none of us watch and then never had any chance to be in the GSL. Like, to me, the novelty will just wear off real quick. I actually expect this one. I think, like I say, I think within the first few games, it'll just be people on Reddit saying, like, so how did he do? And then they won't watch the games. Like, no, I think a lot of this hype is sort of like, it's like you say, it's what we wish happened. Like, we wish Doublelift had gone to some team, or we wish Bjergsen had played on fucking NIP in LPL for a year or something. But sadly, they never did, unfortunately. I don't think that will change either, by the way. I don't think the Challenger will change that factor. At least I can't think of how it would.
Who even has the connections to put Reckless in T1? Is Joe Marsh, like, still T1?
Put it this way, as far as I know, he has no say in any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I've told this story before. People might remember when Joe Marsh took over, that twat, and I call him a twat because he's been a prick to me multiple times. I've never heard of him doing anything good. That guy called Tolkien, who was an assistant coach, who then later went and was an assistant coach in Fnatic. Oh, they all loved to brag in interviews about what they were doing with the Korean players in the real T1 League of Legends squad. And all I'll tell you is you can go back, there's like an interview about this that was even translated. And that guy, Coach Kim, when he was the coach of T1, basically said something to the effect of like, we don't listen to them, or like, we just sort of like, it's almost like, you know, they nod and smile when that fucking guy talks. And they're sort of like, right, is the fucking white guy out of the room now? Yeah, like, here's what we're actually doing. And that was just all fucking marketing bullshit as far as I can tell. So yeah, the other issue is people are thinking that this is like, that they think of Joe Marsh like he's fucking Mark Cuban of the Mavericks, and because he's just so rich he can do whatever he wants. Here's the thing, I don't think he has any say in it. Like, there's no universe, in my opinion, where this is the other thing as well. I really hope people aren't on some fanfic shit where they think Faker gives a flying fuck about playing with Reckless roll swap to support. I please hope that isn't even in anyone's mind. Like, if it is actually in your mind, for real, one, you need to quit the internet cold turkey because narratives have actually infested your brain, and then two, you are actually living in a delusional fanfic. Like, that is not reality. You don't know Faker, and also, if you just look at his career, Faker doesn't actually seem like that sentimental a person. I think he seems pretty cutthroat to me. Like, so I think that story's just nothing to me. You got any final thoughts on this one?
I'll admit I was kind of wrong. I think you convinced me pretty well. I was just kind of, you're right that it's Challenger and not really something big. I was kind of, even though I've never liked Reckless ever, I was just kind of hyped just to see a Western player go to Korea. But you are right that, like, just because he's in Challenger and just because he's on T1 Challenger does not mean anything. I never thought he'd play for, T1. Absolutely not. But yeah, it does not guarantee that he'd ever get a spot in Korea. So yeah.
By the way, I don't hate the idea, like you say, of like maybe like a talent could go to Challenger and then prove them. Obviously, it's not going to be Reckless. I mean, it's just roll swap. That's the biggest problem, in my opinion. But like the idea, I mean, look, I know, by the way, just as a detail, it has happened a couple of times with it. Like, if you don't know, believe it or not, Cody's son, the old 100 Thieves player, played on like an ERL team, an LFL team, sorry, in the French league. There was like a couple of players have done that. It's just that it never really turned into anything, unfortunately. So in the same sense as why I was glad someone did do that, look, in principle, if this means in the future that there might be some like next super talent in Europe that can go and play in a Challenger team, that's not that bad. The real problem is this. The other thing that's probably the last thing I should say on this topic is I thought I made this pretty clear when I talked about LS's problems with T1. Let me just reiterate this. Koreans do not give a flying fuck about people who aren't Korean. Like, I would just say this to the Western fans. Do you imagine that the first foreign player to play in the LCK as a big name will be a fucking European or American as opposed to a Chinese player? Like, if it was anything, it'd be a Chinese player, wouldn't it? Like, they actually are the best in the world. But you'll notice that's never even been rumoured as far as I know. I believe there's never even been a behind the scenes like we were trying to get this guy type rumour. I've never even heard of an inquiry, which is the craziest part. So unfortunately, I just don't think Koreans give a fuck about playing with anyone not Korean. Like, I think they would have to almost be forced on them by the org. It's the worst region to think that you're going to get the import. The Chinese do it because they know how sick the Koreans are. They play them on the solo queue ladder every day, and it's a big draw. So unfortunately, I just don't see it ever happening as a move. Even though I agree, it would be cool as fuck. Like, obviously, the best ones would have been, like, the joke is, like I say, if the old Reckless was ADC and then he joined, like, Frederick Bray, now let's see, now let's have some fun. But I just don't think it's ever even a dream for the Koreans to do, because they don't really need to. Like, I also would say, if you're a GM, you're almost an idiot if you build a non-Korean team if you're in the LCK. Like, mate, you've already got all the talent, just build a good team.
Yeah. At the other end of that, do you think, like, there's possibility of any European player going to China, or is that just like too much culture shock for the Europeans?
The main problem is
no one would
want to live there, mate. That's exactly the issue.
Yeah.
And also, you're almost certainly going to have a nightmare, by the way. Like, imagine them remember, like, you're already speaking second language English in LEC, but imagine speaking second language English to someone who barely speaks English. That's going to be so insanely frustrating. Like, I don't think anyone could handle it, mate. So even if you were, like, really good, and even if the team was good, I just don't think it would ever work. Like, I've always said this back in the day. People might know the classic one I used to always pick out was the guy Mystic, who played for Team WE. He was a Korean ADC, and he played in a team that had, like, Shiye and those guys in. This guy was a stud, and he really did just carry tons of team fights in the LPL. But, I mean, I've always said the reason I gave him mad props is, dude, that's like playing a solo queue game with no comms. Like, how the fuck do you team fight as an ADC when you have Chinese teammates peeling for you that you can't speak to in their native language? Like that, if you can do that, you have insane mental fucking fortitude. Like, holy shit, mate. So God bless if you try it, but I don't think it's a great, beyond the novelty, unfortunately, it's not really a great outcome for any party, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I never really understood how that 2014 Royal Club team was able to make a Worlds final by
it's a miracle.
Just
Absolutely.
pinging on the map.
No, it's real as well. Like, if you ever go back, that you can actually see on the video, they really are just pinging. And then, so essentially, it was just like a high-skilled solo queue game, and then just had the UZI Worlds buff. And so somehow, it's a miracle they did it, but fair play. They did indeed do it. When I make content, it isn't just me, the mic, and a guest or a topic. It's also me with the support of my whole crew. Who's that, you might ask? The Skrilluminati. That's who. They include Frisky, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Tosh, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Animosity, Tooorin, and you know it if you've heard it before, but if you haven't, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Well, if you want to know upcoming topics and guests I'm going to have on my channel, maybe you want to ask me a question to answer in an AMA in video fashion. Do you want to hear one of those long discussions and actually be part of it and be able to ask me questions? Want to find out who I'm going to interview next? If any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.